cop thought he pulled over just another black man. He didn't know he was cuffing a high-ranking Army officer with receipts. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, dry heat, clear skies, the kind of day nobody usually remembers. Officer Bradley Kinsey was halfway through his shift, driving his cruiser through the west end of Toledo, Ohio, when he spotted a black Dodge Charger a few cars ahead. It had a slight dent above the rear bumper and, more importantly to Kinsey, a cracked taillight. He didn't light it up right away. He watched, clocked the driver's profile. Dark-skinned, clean haircut, sunglasses. Seemed calm, maybe too calm. The car didn't speed or swerve. Still, Kinsey's gut told him this was one of those guys, the type who thinks he's smarter than you, slick with his words. A talker, a challenger. So he hit the lights. The Charger pulled over immediately, smooth and without fuss, just off Bancroft Street near an old gas station. No hesitation, no delay. That annoyed Kinsey. He expected nervousness, maybe a shaky hand on the wheel, maybe fumbling for registration. But this guy, he just waited, engine off, hands visible on the steering wheel. Kinsey walked up slow, hand near his holster. "License and registration," he said, voice clipped. The man handed it over without a word, then finally spoke. "Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop?" Kinsey raised his chin. "Broken taillight." The man gave a tight nod. "I see. I wasn't aware." The tone was respectful, but Kinsey didn't like it. It didn't sound submissive. It sounded like the guy was measuring him. "You been drinking today?" Kinsey asked suddenly. "No, sir." "You got any weapons in the car?" "Yes, legally owned, secured in the trunk. I'm a concealed carry permit holder." Kinsey paused. That wasn't the answer he wanted. He expected a stumble, a crack, something to grab onto. Instead, this man was calm, practiced. "Step out the vehicle," Kinsey ordered. "Sir, I don't believe that's necessary unless I'm being detained for something specific. I'm happy to comply, but I'd like clarification." There it was, not angry, not loud, but direct. Kinsey's eyes narrowed. "You're being detained for suspicious behavior. Now step out of the vehicle." The man took a breath and slowly opened the door. As soon as his foot hit the pavement, Kinsey stepped forward and grabbed his wrist. "Hands on the hood." "Officer, I said now." People were watching. A woman at the gas pump paused mid-fill. A kid on a bike slowed down. Phones were up. That made Kinsey angrier. The man wasn't fighting him, but he wasn't cowed either. That was enough for Kinsey. He shoved him forward, cuffed him rough, and told dispatch he had one in custody. When backup arrived 10 minutes later, Kinsey had already written the report in his head. Suspicious behavior, failed to follow verbal commands, resisted briefly, possible threat due to firearm. The usual. He hadn't even read the man's ID fully yet. But when the officer beside him asked, Kinsey glanced at the license. Lieutenant Colonel Warren Ellison, United States Army. A split-second flicker of hesitation crossed Kinsey's face. Just one blink. But by then, it was too late. The gears were already turning. But Kinsey didn't know that in the next few days, the man he thought would disappear quietly into the system would become the center of a storm he couldn't control. Warren Ellison was never the type to raise his voice. He didn't need to. He grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, raised by a steelworker father and a public school librarian mother. Discipline, honesty, and humility weren't just values in the Ellison house. They were the rules of survival. From a young age, Warren had a quiet kind of presence, the type that made people listen when he did decide to speak. By 17, he'd already mapped out his path, college through ROTC, then military intelligence. He stuck to it with laser focus. No shortcuts, no scandals, no excuses. 23 years later, he held the rank of lieutenant colonel, with deployments to Iraq, Germany, and South Korea under his belt. He had seen war. He had negotiated in situations where one wrong word could mean 10 lives gone. And yet here he was, on U.S. soil, in his hometown, face down on hot pavement, arrested over a cracked taillight. "I've been trained to keep my hands steady, even when I'm bleeding," he'd tell his brother later that night. "But it took everything in me not to clench my fists when he shoved me." Warren wasn't surprised by the arrest. Disappointed, yes. Embarrassed, maybe. But not surprised. What stuck with him most wasn't the handcuffs or the rough language. It was the look in the officer's eyes, like Warren wasn't a man, just another file to be processed. No matter what he said, No matter how clearly he spoke, Kinsey had already decided who he was. The next morning, Warren sat at his mother's kitchen table in silence. His knuckles were red. His uniform, pressed and folded on the back of a chair, was untouched since the night before. His niece tiptoed into the room holding a plastic army jeep and asked, "Uncle Warren, are you going to jail?" He didn't know how to answer. Instead, he picked up his phone and made a call to Avery Ricks, an old college friend turned civil rights attorney in Detroit. Avery listened carefully, didn't interrupt, and then asked one question. "Do you want to fight this? Or make sure nobody else has to?" Warren looked out the window. His Charger was parked outside, a ticket under the wiper, and the trunk still untouched since the search. His record was clean, his conscience even cleaner. "I want the truth on paper," he said, "and I want that man to answer for it." But Warren didn't realize yet that the system he'd spent his life protecting would fight back harder than he expected. The footage didn't lie. A gas station camera caught nearly everything, the lights flashing behind Warren's Charger, the way he stepped out of the vehicle with slow, deliberate movements, his hands visible the entire time. It caught Kinsey grabbing his wrist before any real words were exchanged. It caught the shove, the snap of cuffs, and Warren's head turning just slightly, making eye contact with the young boy on the bike across the street. That clip made its way to the local news within 48 hours. But the police report painted a different story. "Driver appeared agitated and refused to comply with commands," Kinsey wrote. Subject raised his voice and stepped aggressively toward officer. Officer used standard detainment protocol to neutralize potential threat. It was so routine, so clean, but it just didn't match what people were seeing online. The story spread like fire on social media, especially once someone posted a photo of Warren in uniform next to a screenshot of him being cuffed. From battlefield to pavement. He served the country. Now he's serving time? The mayor's office got flooded with calls. The department's PR team tried spinning it, but the damage was done. People had questions. And for the first time in a while, Officer Bradley Kinsey had to answer some of them. He was called into his supervisor's office that Friday morning, just after his third interview request from a national news outlet. "You sure this is what happened?" the sergeant asked, tossing the report on the desk. Kinsey didn't flinch. "That's what happened." "You had your body cam on?" "No, forgot to activate it." "You forgot." Kinsey nodded, jaw locked tight. The sergeant sighed and leaned back. "They're gonna come after you for this." Kinsey crossed his arms. "Let 'em. I've got 15 letters of commendation and a perfect record. This guy wants to play victim? Fine. We'll see how it goes in court." But what Kinsey didn't know was that Warren had already filed a formal complaint and retained legal counsel. Avery Ricks wasn't just any lawyer. He was known for exposing dirty officers in courtrooms that were more circus than courthouse, and he was good at it. Meanwhile, Warren kept quiet. He didn't post. He didn't speak to the press. He let Avery handle the storm, but behind closed doors, he wrote everything down. Every detail, every word spoken, every move made. He documented it like an after-action report, cold, clear, factual. Then came the court date. Warren walked in with his attorney and 2 retired military officers beside him. Kinsey, in uniform, sat with his own lawyer watching the crowd fill the benches. Local veterans, high school teachers, a reporter from the Toledo Blade, even that same kid from the bike, now with his mother. And when the judge called the case number, you could have heard a pin drop. State of Ohio versus Warren Ellison. The charges: obstruction, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. Kinsey leaned forward, hands clasped. Warren stood tall and still, but the silence of that courtroom wouldn't last. Not once Avery Ricks opened his mouth. "Your Honor," Avery said, stepping forward slowly, "we'll be entering a not guilty plea on all charges, and we have a motion ready to dismiss the case entirely, based on fabricated statements by the arresting officer." A murmur spread through the gallery. Kinsey's jaw tightened, but his eyes didn't move. He was staring straight ahead, breathing through his nose like someone holding back an outburst. The judge, a pale man in his early 60s with deep creases in his forehead, adjusted his glasses. "I'll allow the motion to be submitted," he said, "but we'll hear arguments first." Avery was ready. He'd been ready. He walked the courtroom through the sequence: camera footage, timeline discrepancies, and Warren's military record. He pointed out the calm, consistent behavior of the defendant. He showed a still frame of Warren's hands raised at his sides while Kinsey reached for the cuffs. Then he asked the court clerk to read aloud a section from Kinsey's written report. Driver began shouting and stepping forward aggressively. Avery turned back to the screen behind him. The video clearly showed Warren motionless, not shouting, not stepping, just standing, silent. "What part of that looks aggressive to you?" he asked the courtroom, not the judge. No one answered. Kinsey's lawyer objected, but the tone in the room had already shifted. The public wasn't stupid. They could see the truth right in front of them. Over the next few days, the story made national news. Every headline hit harder than the last. Army officer wrongfully arrested by Toledo cop. Lieutenant Colonel accuses officer of lying under oath. Body cam off, but surveillance tells the story. Warren kept his head down, but his inbox filled with hundreds of messages. From strangers, former soldiers, even some local cops. Some just said, "We're with you." Others said, "That could have been me." Meanwhile, Kinsey stayed silent. The department put him on administrative leave pending investigation, but he still walked around like the badge was stitched into his skin. In private, though, cracks were forming. He spent hours replaying the video, looking for ways to explain it away. Maybe Warren's posture was hostile. Maybe he sensed something the camera didn't pick up. But the truth? The truth was staring him in the face, and it wasn't budging. The next hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, and both men knew it wouldn't just be about what happened on that street. It would be about everything the badge was supposed to stand for, and everything it had come to mean instead. But what Kinsey didn't expect was how fast his own reputation would start to fall apart. Monday morning hit different. The courtroom was packed by 8:30, not just with reporters and concerned citizens, but with people who had their own stories about Officer Bradley Kinsey. Some came because they heard the news. Others came because they remembered. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Then the room settled into a tension so thick you could feel it pressing on your chest. Avery stood first. "Your Honor, before we proceed with further argument on the motion to dismiss, we'd like to enter additional evidence into the record." He handed a folder to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The courtroom watched silently as the judge flipped through. "3 statements," Avery said, "from citizens who were previously stopped, cited, or arrested by Officer Kinsey. Their accounts describe a pattern of behavior, unprovoked aggression, fabricated charges, use of force where none was needed." Kinsey's lawyer stood. "Objection, irrelevant to the current case." But the judge raised a hand. "I'll allow it. Pattern of behavior can speak to credibility." Kinsey shifted in his chair. That was the first time anyone had seen him move all morning. Avery continued, his voice calm but direct. "Look, we're not here to paint every officer as the problem, but we are here to hold one man accountable for what he did and for what he wrote down, knowing it wasn't true. This isn't about hate, it's about truth. And no badge should make someone immune to that." Then he turned to Kinsey. "If you believe your version of events is the real one, then let's hear it." The courtroom went quiet again. The judge looked over. "Officer Kinsey, would you like to make a statement?" Kinsey stood slowly. He straightened his posture, cleared his throat, and stepped forward. He was still in uniform, still carrying himself with authority, but this time he looked unsure. "I believed I was following protocol," he started. The driver, he was calm, yes, but his tone felt confrontational. "I've had situations spiral out of control fast. I made a call in the moment." "Is that call the one where you grabbed his wrist before he spoke?" Avery asked. Kinsey hesitated. "I felt a threat." "Did you feel that same threat when you wrote the report later? When you said he shouted, stepped forward?" Kinsey looked toward the judge, then the gallery, then down at his hands. "I made a mistake," he said, "but I didn't lie." Avery turned back to the judge. "Then let the video decide." The judge nodded. "I've reviewed the footage, I've reviewed the statements, and I'll say this. What I see in the video and what I read in the officer's report do not match. At all." A hush swept through the courtroom. The judge continued. "This case isn't just about one moment. It's about how easily authority can be abused when no one is watching. Mr. Ellison, you're free to go. Charges are dismissed." The gavel dropped. There was no cheer, no applause, just a slow exhale from the crowd, like everyone had been holding their breath. Warren didn't smile. He nodded to the judge, shook Avery's hand, and walked out. Steady, like a man who'd seen this kind of fight before, just never on his own soil. As he reached the courthouse steps, a reporter pushed forward with a mic. "Lieutenant Colonel Ellison, do you think justice was served today?" Warren paused, looked into the lens. Justice isn't served in one courtroom. It's earned every time someone decides to tell the truth. And sometimes, you've got to be loud enough so the lies don't win. Then he walked away. But Kinsey's story wasn't over yet, because when the truth comes out, it keeps pulling until everything's exposed. The dismissal should have been the end, but it wasn't. 2 days after the court ruling, the Toledo Internal Affairs Division received 3 more complaints, all linked to Officer Bradley Kinsey. One woman said Kinsey pulled her over for failing to signal a lane change, then had her sit on the curb for 30 minutes while he searched for warrants. Nothing was found. Another man claimed Kinsey yanked him from his car in front of his daughter for driving suspiciously, then released him without explanation. No tickets, no paperwork. Until now, none of these people had come forward. They figured it wouldn't matter. But after Warren's story went public, everything changed. The mayor called for a full investigation. The police chief gave a press statement. "We take these allegations seriously, and we are conducting a thorough review of Officer Kinsey's conduct." Privately, the department was split. Some officers felt Kinsey was being thrown under the bus. Others had seen enough over the years to believe it was long overdue. Kinsey stopped showing up to work. His name disappeared from the active duty roster. The news started digging into old cases looking for patterns, and they found them. Same language in reports, same phrases. Uncooperative. Raised his voice. Made sudden movements. But nearly every arrest lacked solid evidence. No body cam footage, no witnesses, no convictions. Meanwhile, Warren went back to his routine quietly. He didn't chase interviews. He didn't file a civil suit, though he could have. He just kept showing up at the local community center, mentoring high school students like he always did. One night, after a youth workshop on leadership, a teenager approached him and said, "I saw that video of you. That cop tried to play you like you were nobody." Warren looked the kid in the eye. "I've been called a lot of things," he said, "but nobody has never been one of them. Not even when they tried to make me feel like one." The boy nodded slowly. "That's why I'm staying out of trouble," he said. "I ain't trying to get done like that." Warren placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's not the goal. The goal is to stay true, not just stay out of trouble. Speak right, move right, but don't ever let fear decide who you're going to be." That moment never made the news, but it mattered. Back at the department, Kinsey was placed on unpaid suspension. His record was under review. He'd gone from untouchable to isolated. No more locker room nods, no more quiet respect. And when an old sergeant ran into him at a gas station weeks later, he didn't say hello. He just looked at Kinsey and said, "You should have turned your camera on," then walked away. But while Kinsey's name was fading, Warren's was growing louder, and the message he carried was starting to reach people who'd never been heard before. 6 months later, Warren was invited to speak at a town hall meeting in Akron, just a few hours east. The room was full, folding chairs in tight rows, grandmothers in church hats, teens in oversized hoodies, off-duty officers sitting in the back with arms folded. He didn't use a mic. He didn't need one. "I'm not here to talk about revenge," he began. "I'm here to talk about something I've carried for a long time. A uniform doesn't make a man right. A badge doesn't make a man wrong. But character, that's what speaks." He paused, let the silence do the heavy lifting. "When Officer Kinsey pulled me over, he didn't see Lieutenant Colonel Ellison. He didn't see a son, a mentor, a man who served his country. He saw someone he thought he could break in 2 minutes, because he'd done it before, because no one ever stopped him." Some folks in the crowd nodded slowly. Others sat stiff, listening harder than they wanted to. "I didn't win in court because I shouted the loudest. I won because the truth stood still long enough for everyone to see it. And the truth doesn't need a badge or a podium. It just needs people willing to speak it, even when their voice shakes." A woman stood up near the back. "Do you forgive him?" she asked. Warren took a breath. "I don't hate him, but forgiveness don't mean forgetting. It means I'm not carrying his actions on my back every day. That's his weight now, not mine." Later that night, Warren sat alone in his car before heading back to Toledo. He looked at his hands, the same ones Kinsey twisted behind his back months ago. The same hands that signed enlistment papers, that buried brothers overseas, that once held his niece's tiny fingers as she took her first steps. Those hands weren't made for silence. And now they were part of something louder. Not just a story, a reminder that silence lets people like Kinsey thrive. But the moment someone speaks up, really speaks, everything starts to shift. And respect, real respect, it isn't taken, it's earned. It's not worn on your chest. It's how you carry yourself when nobody's watching. We can't keep quiet when the truth gets pushed aside. If you've been through something like this, or you know someone who has, talk about it. Share the story, say the name. Because if we don't speak up, the next Kinsey will think he can do it again, and eventually, he will.